So hey Roya, how you doing?
Hey, good.
Good. I failed to ask you, how do you pronounce your last name?
Vasseghi. It's much easier than it looks. Yeah,
Yeah.
Vasseghi.
Well, good to have you again. Good to chat with you again, Roya. It's
Yeah.
been a while. I know you've been traveling and you've been doing a lot of different stuff, but I'm glad that we can finally connect and schedule this interview because it's such an important topic, employment law. And
Yeah.
you are an expert in employment law, so I have the perfect person to chat to. But before we dive deep into some of the questions and some of the things that we talked about, tell me little bit about yourself and your practice. And I just saw that you received an award this past February. So tell us a little bit about that as well.
Oh, I don't remember which award. You mean for the my work with the trade association?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, sure. I can talk about that. Well, I'm an employment lawyer. Well, I do a little bit of I do employment and I litigate business disputes as well. But a good part of my practice is counseling companies on compliance with employment laws, hiring, firing, risk mitigation. I mean, my goal, I tell everyone, is that my clients don't get sued, but I'm there to help them if they do. I mean, I can defend against any litigation filed against them, but my goal is really to stay ahead of that and work with my clients so that they don't get sued. And I like to consider myself, I'm outside, they're outside general counsel for employment and business related things. And I'm pretty, I keep in close contact with most of my clients. I enjoy the clients that I work with. I feel like I'm part of their team, with my role in keeping them out of trouble and keeping legal costs down.
No, I think that's pretty cool. I love what you said. You try to keep them out of trouble. So
Yeah.
it's really the work outside of the court that's really more important than getting into the court system.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I love to litigate as well. I can do it. It's pretty adversarial and aggressive and, it can be taxing, but it's also very interesting. But my preference is always that my clients, at least if it's on my watch, they don't get sued.
Yeah. So what are some of the common employment issues that you see? I'm sure there's a lot, but what are some of the maybe the one or two things, especially since we're post-pandemic or we're coming out of the pandemic with the hybrid way of working? What are some of the things that you're seeing and companies are changing and working towards?
Yeah, there's a lot of things there. Well, just getting used to having the hybrid workforce, even in our own, in my own firm, it's smaller, but managing people remotely has been a hot topic. It's been something that the people want to hear about, employers want to hear about. Um, it's a lot of it's not even employment related. It can touch on employment law, but it's just, how to be a good manager. It's hard enough, I think, in person. It's an art, and not everybody knows how to do it. And it gets employers in a lot of trouble, even when everyone's in the office, right? If you have a bad manager, it it can open, somebody that doesn't know how to manage properly can open a company up to liability. But I've been working with clients and also just speaking a lot on managing a hybrid workforce and tips to make it successful. Um, and from like when it touches on the employment law context, it's the same thing that my clients are just, I'm sure, so tired of hearing me say, be very clear in your policies, especially when you have a remote workforce or a hybrid workforce. Make sure that everybody is very clear on, where's the handbook? What does the handbook say? What are the leave policies? When we had all of the mandatory uh, federal, state, and local leave for COVID. That was, very important. Make sure the employees know about it, but also just make sure that the disciplinary process is clear and consistently followed. Because if it's not clear, remote or not remote, and you want to get rid of somebody because you have to, they're not a good employee, but you haven't been clear about your policies and procedures, the employer could be opened up to liability there as well. I'm happy to talk about any of that, but yeah, it can
Yeah.
it can be a lot.
Yeah, I bet it can. You probably have a lot of different challenges in each of those specific areas. So the one of the first areas you mentioned was having a good manager, having a good boss,
Yeah.
having a good supervisor managing that team. What are some of the ways that you work with your clients to ensure that's like one of the first things they cover is to ensure that their manager is actually up to par to manage the team?
So two things from an employment law perspective, I make sure that when my client lets me, that their managers are trained So that they're trained on the specific policies in their book, their handbook. They know what the rules are in their company or organization, but also that they understand what the law is. Because often, people don't come, not all situations involve somebody coming up, for example, to a manager and saying, I need an accommodation. They might say, oh, I'm going to have to miss a lot of work because I've been having headaches and I'm going, to a specialist or whatever. I mean, that might be enough to trigger, depending on the size of the company and where the company is located, that might be enough to trigger, compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. If they're in a state or local area that has their own rules, it may be enough to trigger. So making sure that the managers know how to recognize that. So they're not in a situation where in the situation where there's an employee that needs to be terminated, they haven't complied with what they need to comply with, in a disability context. Now they're faced with a retaliation or some other kind of claim, wrongful termination, because they didn't, follow the law. So I like to make sure that not only my contacts at the company are trained in the employment laws and policies, but also that their managers that are dealing with it every day are trained as well.
Yeah,
But from a management perspective, like what makes a good manager, I tell my clients my new thing, because I love coaching, but I've been really a huge proponent of recommending that to my clients for their managers.
No, I think
And not as in they did something wrong, but just this is how this is how you become an effective manager, even if they start out strong. I think coaching is great.
No, I appreciate you saying that, because that's such an important element of these organizations and companies hiring managers or general managers or supervisors or team leads. Is to, number one, have that SOP, have that employment handbook. That's so important, and that's something you definitely help them with, and sort of crafting that SOP so that when the managers come in, they go through and understand what the SOP is all about, and then implementing that SOP to the employees that the managers are going to supervise and work on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So how often should managers typically, have that training and also train their employees, go through that SOP to make sure that they're just not in compliance with state and federal law, but also just with company policy? How often do you think that training should occur?
I mean, I would recommend a minimum of once a year. This never happens though. I think that they should be trained once a year. If there's a change, a significant change, for example, in Virginia in 2020, we're constantly having changing employment laws, but 2020 was, we had a lot of new employment laws come into play in Virginia. I mean, that's a good time for a refresher. Definitely the handbooks need to be updated when that happens. For my clients, I try to meet with them once a year, just not a, like, let's sit down and let me bill you, but just let's chat where, how are things been, what's going on. And I try to see if there's anything there that they've overlooked. Sometimes often I am with my clients from the beginning, and I love that, but you don't always need an employment lawyer right in the beginning. And so people come to me later. So I don't know, they may come to me for a specific issue. I don't know what they've had in place before. So I like to check in once a year and just see what needs reviewing, what needs updating. Is there training that can be done? And it doesn't always have to be done. I can do the training. It doesn't always have to be done through an attorney. There are plenty of organizations that provide this kind of training. And it can be more cost effective.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Is to at least once a year, and at least when there's a major shift in policy, whether it's federal law or policy, especially in the federal and state level, and particularly with the hybrid model of everyone sort of like staying at home or having the option of working a certain percentage of the 5 days or 6 days a week they work to be at home. What are some of the challenges that you've seen in the past 2-3 years, especially with the pandemic, in the hybrid model related to employment law, and how managers, what are some of the gaps that you see there?
I, like I was saying, I think it's really difficult to manage generally. I think adding the hybrid and having people, kind of be left on their own, depending on what the job is and what the level is, it can be really challenging. It's challenging for the employee. It's also challenging for the manager. How are you supposed to keep track of everybody? What's the best way to make sure that people are getting tasks communicated to them clearly? I mean, those assignments are expectations, right? And if they're not doing the assignments correctly because the expectations weren't clearly communicated to them, makes a question of whether or not you can discipline them or terminate. It could be at will. A lot of I mean, most places are at will, but you still have to do it right, make sure that you've documented performance issues. And if the expectations haven't clearly been communicated to the employee, and maybe part of that's because they're remote and it's harder to communicate that to them, it can be problematic. So that just communication has been huge. And also just integrating as we come back. This has also come up a lot, the people that are staying home because because they're high risk or they have something else that's going on related to the pandemic and they're not coming in. How do you treat those employees fairly and make sure that those employees have the same opportunities or as similar of an opportunity as those that are in the office every day, and how to make those people feel also part of the team?
Yeah. No, that's a great point that you just brought up is going back to office. There might be some risk factors for individuals going back to the office for a variety of different reasons. And ensuring that they do have a similar opportunities for either work bonuses or some kind of ensuring that their performance plans are on the same level per se for their position in relationship to other employees in the business. So now that we talked about the training element and some of the things that are happening there, you also talked about some of the processes for ensuring that the manual has in terms of how do you handle punishment, how do you handle firing, how do you handle hiring. What are some of the key areas within those areas that business owners should be aware of?
Just consistency, being clear and making sure that they're in there, the policies are clearly written down, but also just being consistent. Obviously, if somebody does something, most employers have progressive discipline, right? First step is a warning, second, verbal warning, then we go to a written warning, and then if it's bad enough, you could be terminated. You may be terminated. Obviously, if somebody does something egregious, they're an at-will employee, they've got to go. They steal or they do something that would hurt someone else or expose the company to liability. Yeah, they jump, they skip the line for the disciplinary process. But if you're, if managers, and this gets tricky in bigger organizations with different people managing and different management styles, if the policies aren't being clearly applied across the board, that could potentially give rise to a discrimination claim. Even when there's no discrimination there, it just doesn't look good. So it's hard, but I really repeatedly try to reinforce that employers should be really consistent in applying their policies. And every time we were talking severance and trying to, if we're going to give an employee a severance, I remind an employer that what you do here, you don't have to do it for everyone, but there could be a time where this comes up. And if you don't treat everyone the same, it could expose the company to liability there as well. No one likes talking to me. As I'm talking, I realize no one likes talking to me. It's like, here's where you can get in trouble. Here's where you can get in trouble.
Well, this is why you're so important to talk to, because you can map out and show people what the landmines are before they step on them. So that's the cool part about it.
Yeah. I mean, some people appreciate that. I warn everybody. When in our first meeting, I warn them that it's a lot of bad news that I kind of lay out there, but it's just potential bad outcomes, and I'm here to help you navigate that. Exactly what you said.
No, I think that's very important, because sometimes a lot of business owners, they just they start their business, they're comfortable with their team around them until something happens, until the team member is like, hey, that wasn't fair, and then they're like, oh no, they built this, they built their own landmine, put it that way. And then they consciously or unconsciously stepped on it, and then it's like, oh no. So it's easier to prevent the fire versus outing the fire, I would say.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think another good thing, I love that you mentioned consistency, because that means that management has to be very proactive in their management. But I think it's also tracking, because it's also consistency in implementing, but also documenting and tracking whatever complaints they have or whatever rewards they're giving their employees. I think that's also part of that process where the consistency comes in. So it works all the way around. So that's also, I think, one thing that business owners should consider is having your handbook, but then how do you track your communication? Like you mentioned earlier, communication is key, but then how do you track that, especially in a
Yeah.
hybrid model?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the documentation, this comes up all the time for me with my clients. It doesn't have, well, one, the policy for reporting a complaint. So if an employee has a concern, it's so important to make sure that the way that they report that concern is really clear. And depending on the size of the company, I mean, if it's just you, you're the manager and you've got one employee, I mean, they can go nowhere else than to, an agency to complain about you. But if you've got other avenues, I think that needs to be really clear, because if an employee has an issue with a manager, they need to have somewhere else to go, and that needs to be clearly put out in the handbook. But as far as documenting disciplinary issues, it doesn't have to be a big deal. It can be just an email. It could be you sat down with the employee, you had a conversation, and then you just send an email to yourself, and you put it in their file. And by file, I mean digital file. So you put in an email folder, name of employee. We talked about this that way. If it, it's a little bit of an extra step, but if you have to get down to the point where you need to terminate them and they come back and say it was wrongful termination, you discriminated against me, you can say, no, you have poor performance. This is why we terminated you. Here's how we're showing that. It doesn't take long, but not having it costs so many more thousands of dollars.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
think putting in that few minutes to just document the conversation, even though we're, as business owners, we're busy, we have a million other things to do. It's a really important step.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I definitely hear you on saying that. It's just consistent communication and documenting that communication, and then preserving the communication, so vital. Especially when you come in as an attorney, you want to see that track record. You definitely have to analyze that track record.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you see a difference between, let's say, a 5 employee company versus, 100 or 200 employee company corporation? Do you see any differences in employment issues or even application for the law across different sizes of companies?
I don't know how to answer this question. Yes and no. I mean, the bigger companies, they've got outside counsel, they've got handbooks, they've dealt with a lawyer before, they kind of know the ropes. They're more experienced in that way. But a lot of the times they're doing the same things. Even when they've got their own internal legal departments, they can, sometimes the same issues come up and they're not handled, not intentionally. They're just, for whatever reason, that the issue is handled in a way that could potentially expose the company to liability. With the smaller companies, what often happens is they, especially with those that have grown very quickly, they don't kind of start out having the right structure in place, because legal is not, a priority at the beginning. They grow quickly, and they often end up coming to me when they have an issue, not because they want a handbook, but they need to fire somebody, and there's, they think the person might allege discrimination. And then I kind of, I deal with that situation and I work backwards and help kind of put those structures in place. But honestly, you would think that the problems are different because of the size. They can often be the same. And I think management concerns and how employees are managed they're really the same. I could be wrong. I don't have any 1,000 employee clients at this time yet, but when I'm talking about hundreds versus 10 to 20, a lot of the issues with management are the same.
No, I'm glad you made that distinction, because and I totally agree with you, because sometimes when you have a business that has 5 employees or 10 employees, there's this perception of those business owners that, oh my God, these large organizations, they have deep pockets, they have such deeper pockets for better resources or different resources, when in fact it's really the same issue. You're managing human beings.
Yeah.
and it's really, write your handbook. That's the basic thing. Every company should have its own employee handbook. And how do you track and how do you regulate that and train your managers to do the same thing? So whether it's a 5-person business shop or 100 or 50 or 100 or 1,000 employees, it's literally the same thing. So I'm glad you made that clear, because a lot of business owners I talk to, from 5 to 100 employees, the smaller ones, they're like, oh, I don't have the resources. Well, that in part that might be true, but you can speak to an employment lawyer like yourself to say, do you have a guidance for, an employment handbook, something like that, and just talk through those things. So the resources are there no matter what the size of the company, because the
Yeah.
issues bound to be the same.
Yeah. I mean, the law is sometimes different with smaller companies because of, federal laws don't kick in until a certain number of employees, but now a lot of states, including, Virginia, where I am, it's a very small number to have the discrimination laws apply, starting as low as 5. So, there's really the differences are kind of being eliminated between how these issues are handled within companies.
Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate you saying that, because it dispels the myth, as I would say. So
Yeah, and I mean, people don't want to. Legal is not something that people want to spend on. It doesn't, honestly, it doesn't even matter the size of the company. I think when they get larger, they know they have to do it, but it's just not something that people normally want to spend on. And it's important. I'm not saying that so people retain me, but it's important to avoid costs down the line. I routinely tell people, and I don't know, maybe this is not good for me or my business, but I tell my employers to get employment practices liability insurance, EPLI insurance. It's a really small cost. If you get, on the premium, it can be small. It depends on how large you are. And if you're sued, if there's something that falls under the policy, you get insurance panel counsel. Oftentimes I don't get to represent them because I'm not on the panel, but some of my small companies, if they get hit with a lawsuit and they're paying, 100,000 plus to defend against the lawsuit, that could break them. I'd rather have them stay in business, even if it means I can't help them and litigate. I stay involved, but I'm not the one litigating on their behalf. But I recommend that to my clients because I like to see people succeed in general. I certainly want my clients to succeed.
No, I definitely hear you on that one. And sometimes when I coach clients, I sometimes tell them, hey, there are 5 people that you should talk to from the day you start your business. And a business lawyer is definitely one of them, someone like yourself. And I tell them, hey, just meet them, talk to them, and go through everything you need in your business, because it's cheaper to pay now than it is to pay for the pain later.
Yeah.
So, by the time the lawsuit comes in, it's going to cost, exponentially more than just sitting down with someone like yourself for like a couple hours and investing in their business for that type of protection. So yeah, it's having that pain up front is one of my favorite sayings.
Yes. Yeah. Good. I'm glad that you're telling people that's the word that I'm spreading as well.
Definitely. So where do you see, from your perspective? I mean, you've worked with so many different companies. You're you're a partner in a firm, in a law firm, which is really cool. You're in business yourself as a part business owner, and you have your family and you're busy and you're doing all these really cool things. Where do you see, based on like the hybrid model, do you see employment changing in the future? Where do you see that going?
I was just having this conversation with some employment lawyers last night. Nobody is very few people I think are going to go back to going into the office full time. It's just not, we can't even, we're talking about how difficult it is to hire people because there just seems to be a shortage of people everywhere. We're not sure where they went. They're definitely not wanting to be lawyers. And just, what it would look like if a lawyer demanded, that their associate attorney come into the office. I mean, it's just not happening 5 days a week. People want to be remote, and I think it's really challenging. I'll just be very candid. I wanted to be the employer that had a fully remote workforce, but I miss talking with people. It's just hard to manage remote. I mean, it can be done and it can be done well, but I think it's really difficult. But I don't think that we would ever, personally, like this firm would never require someone to come in 5 days a week. We would never find anyone to come in 5 days a week. I think giving people, 2 days a week at home is at a minimum required.
Yeah. And I definitely
seems to be like a non-starter for most people.
Yeah.
Going into the office every day.
Yep. And it seems to be, even the age groups of individuals looking and seeking work. I mean, their work habits are also changing to be much more flexible than, when I first started working, not too long ago. And
right. Same.
Yeah, exactly. And and those things are obviously changing because, I mean, there's a lot that goes into that equation. It's not just the pandemic, but it's also like traffic. There's also, telecommunication has improved dramatically. We can hold meetings on our phones right now and things like that. We can share documents online and we can share information so much quicker. So it's almost like the office space is becoming unnecessary from the work operations, but there is a human touch element there that's being missed. Like what you mentioned, the human touch, that conversation, that face-to-face, that body language, that all those elements of that. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see where this goes in the next few years.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's people can do it, but I find that making the remote employees, like fully remote employees, feel part of the team. That can also be a challenge, especially if there's not regular check-ins and things like that set up. It can be challenging. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen companies do some pretty interesting things with the remote teams. They would have like a movie night, so they would actually watch a movie together, like a Friday or Saturday, or they would pick a movie, and then on like a Monday morning meeting, they would talk about the movie, so they kind of feel connected.
Yeah,
little things like that. Yeah. It's a bit harder to manage because you're not watching the movie together, but the communication.
But it's something, right? Otherwise, you could go, you don't have those things or check-ins scheduled, you could go weeks without talking, you're emailing, but without talking to the person. And then it feels, speaking from experience, it feels almost, you're very disconnected from them. So
yeah, you get the Zoom eyes. You get the Zoom.
so much Zoom. But then, I mean, in some instances, from a networking perspective, I've got meetings that have just, stayed on Zoom, and those meetings, like some of them are 7 o'clock in the morning regularly. And I'm okay with that. I may be tired of Zoom, but I'm okay with Zoom and not leaving my house to be anywhere at 7 o'clock in the morning.
There you go. You will always be on time because the traffic excuse is gone.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So there's a pro and cons to all that, but it'd be interesting to see in the next 5-10 years where all this is going to go, especially with individuals who work in different states. It's like over the pandemic, there were of course, I wouldn't say cases, but instances of people who had to work from home, and they decided to say, well, if I don't want to be in this cold climate, I'm just going to go to a warmer place, but still work from home technically. And now that's sort of created the opportunity for business owners to, look beyond their state boundary to hire individuals.
Yeah. They need to call me though, or call somebody. Because then, I mean, I agree. I think it's great. It's opened up a lot of doors, and then the employees have more flexibility, but then at the same time, I think the employers have to be very aware of, okay, where are your employees sitting? What employment laws apply? What do we have to pay taxes there? Do we have to register as doing business there based on one employee? And it's going to be different for every jurisdiction. So that's also been, obviously there's been a rise in that. And that's been something that I've been dealing with, and it comes up a lot more now.
No, I think that's really great, because I don't think many people thought about that in terms of the tax element to it, because that employee may have to pay state taxes wherever they go, or local jurisdictional taxes wherever they are. So does the organization, so does the company. You have to pay those taxes that are where your employee is situated.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's how do I say this? It's an advantage, but also you have to make sure that they speak to someone like you to make sure their bases are covered. Definitely. So it's not like here in the DMV where we can just, go from DC to Maryland to Virginia quite readily, those are easy. But then when you have someone, I know a few business owners that actually hired people overseas.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, what about the tax issue for that employee over there? You better talk to an employment lawyer, or at least and a tax lawyer, to figure out how to
somebody that knows what's going on there.
Exactly.
That one's not me. that for the international, I'll send you to a friend. But yeah, no, it does. It gets complicated, and I think depending on the sophistication and the size of the employer, they might not know that those are things that they have to check into. And then, again, back to the liability, it could open them up to liability.
Yep. Yeah. And that's actually a good point, because then you have to revisit your handbook. You have to go back and look at your employment handbook and how to address those issues as the employment economy changes,
Yes.
benefits and packages and all those things. I mean, I've worked with other business owners, who are negotiating, bringing on employees, and really what they're asking for is so different than when I first started working. Really it was just about salary and benefits like insurance, time off. Now they're asking, well, now they're asking for things like, well, can I work every month? Can I work in a different state? Because we're now hybrid.
Right.
And I'm like, wow, that is really creative, because now, but there's a legal element to that. What happens if, what if question, what happens if they move from state to state? What if they get hurt? What if they're unavailable? All those type of things. How do you cover that?
Yes.
So it gets really interesting.
I mean, I can just tell you from our experience, every time somebody moves to another state, even though it's not that bad, we've got to do all the registration and get the employment, set up with the unemployment taxes and all of that in every state. It's kind of a pain. So, it can be a pain. So, maybe not allow your employee to move every month. Like you said that, and I got really panicked.
Exactly.
I don't want that for us.
No, I saw that. Yeah,
too much.
Yeah, this was one. I know one business owner that I'm working with, and that was one of their prospect was asking them, hey, we're hybrid, and if they don't have any kids, so they can move around but still do the work. And one of their requirements was, every month I would like to be in a different state or someplace else. Is that possible? I was like, oof, that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Oh, good Lord. But no, definitely, looking back at the employment handbook, looking at those what if situations, how do you handle those things ahead of time? Don't wait till you get the notice from the court saying, hey, you're being sued, you got to show up. And then you're just sitting there like, oh no, what do I do? So you definitely want to have these conversations with someone like yourself to say, well, what if, what if this, what if that? It's all part of the risk management. This is why, talking to an attorney, sometimes it's like, oh my God, I don't want to talk to an attorney, but talk to them before, not after the incident. Cover your risk now. That's the story.
I mean, if people think I'm a bummer when I talk to them before they've gotten into trouble, it's a bigger bummer when you get into trouble.
Yeah.
It's a more expensive bummer.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. We're not scary, I promise. Our website says we're fun. We're fun. We can be fun.
You literally say that on your website.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, you really do. I read that paragraph and I'm like, oh, that's cool. I could deal with that.
I mean, we know what we're doing, but we're not that bad to talk to.
Yeah. And what I also like about what you guys do in a general sense, you seem to take a project approach to your clients versus the traditional attorney, pay every 6 minutes, pay every fraction of an hour, an hour thereafter. That's something I've worked with other attorneys to head toward that, but I'm so glad that you guys are doing it. What made you decide to go that route?
I mean, don't get me wrong, we still bill by the hour. But there are some things, and I think clients want it, and we're working. I mean, it's an ongoing process to try to figure out new billing models, because clients don't like paying by the hour. Sometimes, I mean, I can't figure out a better way to do it for some types of things, like litigation, for example. You can't predict what that's going to be.
Right.
Some people have figured out how to do different phases of it on a flat fee, et cetera, but we do a lot of other things. And depending on what it is, especially on the corporate side, for what my partner does, what it's gonna, 9 times out of 10, it's gonna take this long. You kind of know what goes into the project, and you can do a flat fee arrangement for some of the things. And I think clients appreciate that.
Yeah, because they can, some business owners, for them, it's more of a budgeting item situation where they can have a predictable budget moving forward, and working with someone like yourself. So tell me a little bit about you and your firm partners.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 of us. There's 2 partners, and we have 1 associate now, and other, non-attorney staff. But I started on my firm 2020. So it's a few weeks. It was January 27, 2020, just before the pandemic. And I've wanted to do this for a really long time. I decided that this was the time. I had just had my second baby. I don't know why I thought that was a good idea. I don't know. So I said, yeah, let me go start my own firm. And then the pandemic happened. So I thought, okay, well, cool. But it's something that I wanted to do for a really long time, and I've enjoyed it, and it's worked out okay. I mean, I'm still here, and the pandemic is ongoing and was not great for many reasons, but there were a lot of employment issues that came out of it. So being an employment lawyer wasn't necessarily the worst thing to do starting out, having my own firm. So I did that for almost 2 years. And my partner, Kellie Budd, I had worked with her like a decade ago, and we are good friends, and we had, we talked about doing this before, and it was just the right time, and she decided to join. So I was really happy to have her join, because she does similar work to what I do, but she also does that corporate work, setting up entities and advising on other like transactional business issues that I'm not always able to advise on. So it's great to have her. We can offer more to our clients, especially when they come to us from the beginning. We can, she can set them up, and then as they grow, we can start advising on employment issues and things like that. So it's been good. So now like I said, it's the two of us, another attorney. We're hiring, so we're getting there. We're growing.
No, I think that 2020 you started, and you have Kellie Budd, who's your partner in the law firm, and now you're hiring. So I think you guys are doing great. Just 2 years in, officially 2 years in as a team, or as in your practice, and you guys are growing and expanding. So that's success. That's really cool. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. I mean, the reason, besides I just always wanted to do this, I wanted to do it a little bit differently, and I think that's what we're doing. We wanted our website to be different. We wanted our approach to how we handle cases and clients to be different. We genuinely like all of our clients, and we want the best, we want the best outcomes for them. And it's not always the outcome that's going to make us the most money. We're very focused on getting the best outcome for our clients. And that's been, and Kellie has the same philosophy. So it's been great working with her.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. That's really cool. So what are you hiring for? What position?
So another attorney position. So somebody that is an experienced employment lawyer that maybe they're litigating now, and that's a big part of their job, but they want to do a little bit less of that. They want a little bit less of the trial work and litigation, and more counseling to work on the employment side of the practice. So we haven't officially posted anything, but I've been getting the word out. So here I'm getting it out again.
Yeah, well, by the time this airs, I'm sure someone will look at it and say, "Hey, we have some referrals for you," and hopefully, you guys will end up hiring exactly who fits your mold, who fits your culture, who fits your mission, your vision, and all that. So I think that's great. I think that's wonderful. And you're located in Virginia, I think you mentioned.
Yeah, so we're physically located in Virginia. We practice DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and also, depending on where the offices are, I'm not practicing in other states, but a lot of my clients, we were talking about handbooks and employees in different states. A lot of our clients have employees in several different states. So we're handling that type of work too.
Yeah. So there's a research element to what your law firm does as well, because of the different states and jurisdictions that your clients are.
Yeah. I mean, depending on what it is, if we have a client with an office somewhere else, and they actually have an issue with an employee, and that issue looks like it's going to go to litigation, or there's going to be some kind of agency proceedings, then we work with other counsel, because we're probably not the best person to go into court in Ohio, for example, but we can do general, depending on where it is, we can do general advising, and hopefully keep them out of trouble, so they're not going into court in Ohio.
Right. But definitely in DC, Maryland, Virginia, that's where your core, I would say, is.
Yeah, we also have like a New York office, virtual space, and I'm barred in New York, and I do have a couple clients there, but most of them are in DC, Maryland, or Virginia.
Cool. So you and Kellie Budd got together. You knew Kellie for over 10 years. You guys got together. You balance each other well. What made you decide to go into employment law, or just become a lawyer?
Oh, the lawyer, honestly, I mean, this is like this is a terrible answer, but I didn't, it was business or law. Like those are two things that I was interested in doing. I'm kind of doing a hybrid of both now, which is really exciting. But at the time I picked going to law school, and I didn't know that that was going to be, I didn't know if it was going to work out or not, if I was going to like it. I ended up really, I did like it. And I liked most of my jobs that I had after law school, but that's kind of what led me to law school. It was down to those two choices. I liked helping people. I actually wanted to do international law when I started. Then I took my first class and I thought, oh, it's not for me. The rules are not, it's not rigid enough. I need rules, I need structure. And I actually didn't want to do anything with litigation. It was not something that I thought about doing. But I took a couple courses and some clinics when I was in law school, and I really enjoyed it. And so that's what started me down that path. Employment, I've done a little bit of ever since I started practicing, and it's always been very interesting to me. And as I got more, years of experience, I wanted to focus more and more on employment. It's interesting. It doesn't get boring. I mean, it's far from boring. With a lot of crazy stories, but it's just very people. Even working for the company, the management side, there's just like a people element to it, human element to it that I really like.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. I think that's also important, that you had a choice between, well, you had an option between business and law, and then here you are doing both. So yeah,
It's fun.
so you picked both.
Yeah, I did pick both. Yeah, and I probably before I started practicing on my own with, having my own firm, I don't know that I wanted to continue practicing. I wasn't sure. And doing this on my own has made it definitely more interesting for me. And I really enjoy it.
No, that's pretty cool. Well, congratulations on that. And then you mentioned earlier you found Kellie Budd. You guys teamed up together, so it's always good to grow your business with a partnership. And then you guys can actually just, you don't grow double, you grow exponential from that. So continued success on that. So how can we reach you? How can we get in touch with the great Roya, employment lawyer that everyone needs to talk to? You're going to get bummed out, but you get bummed out now versus really bummed out later.
But it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun conversation. It's going to be, you're a little bit bummed out. Email is a great way to reach us. Our website's vasseghi.law. That's going to be very long to spell, so maybe we can share it with everyone.
We'll share it.
But emails, our phone numbers there. Email is a great way to reach me. My email's on the site as well, so you can email directly.
Cool. So what would be the final tip, the last thing when someone, they're watching this interview and they're like, I don't want to hear anything, I just want to go to the end. What would be the one thing you would ask people listening to this to do from an employment law perspective?
So one, call me or somebody from the beginning, right? As soon as you have an employee, and I'm so happy when my clients come to me with just one employee. I'm so proud of them. This is great. You just have one and you want to start and do things the right way. That makes me really happy. So call an employment lawyer right away if you have even one employee, because that one employee, that could be a headache on its own if you don't. But if it's not going to be, if you don't have the resources or you can't do, engage counsel, just make sure to, work with an HR consultant or just be very clear about your policies and procedures. Start putting together your policies and procedures. Even if you don't think you're big enough to do it, I think it's really important to have those things documented down and communicate them clearly, even if it's just you and one other employee.
No, I appreciate that. And thank you for that tip. Hopefully everyone will jump on that and really just get in touch with you and your business partner, your partner in the law firm, Kellie Budd, and just take the bum. Now, how do I say this?
Come up with a marketing line for me. Go ahead.
I know I'm trying to. It's a fun conversation, but we'll think of some.
I like where this is going. I'm not sure we can get it today, but I like where this is going.
Yeah, we'll talk offline, but we'll get it together.
Yeah.
But Roya, thank you for your time. I really appreciate having you on. I mean, we've been going back and forth. It was great to connect with you earlier this year. And I just look forward to learning more where you guys are going to be in about a year from now. So let's keep in touch. And thank you for the interview. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. All right. Take care.
All right. Take care.